Hi, I'm Jennifer Chin, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the power. For 15 years, I worked behind the scenes at Chin Global Solutions, the technology company my brother Michael and I inherited from our father. While Michael became the charismatic face of the company, I quietly built our empire from the shadows. But sometimes, it's only in the shadows that you see people's true colors. I still remember when it all began, back when our company was nothing more than a small IT consulting firm operating out of a converted warehouse in Silicon Valley. Dad had built it from scratch, teaching himself coding while working 3 jobs to support us after we immigrated from Taiwan. Michael was always the golden child, charming, outgoing, destined for greatness. I was the quiet one, the girl who spent weekends learning to code instead of going to parties. When Dad passed away 5 years ago, he left us equal shares of the company. "Take care of each other," he said in his final days. "Together, you can build something extraordinary." What he didn't know was that I had already been building something extraordinary, a revolutionary ad-driven cybersecurity system that would eventually transform our small firm into a billion-dollar enterprise. The problems began 3 years ago when Michael met Victoria at a tech conference. She was everything I wasn't: tall, elegant, armed with an MBA from Stanford and a resume lined with all the right companies. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, she had convinced Michael she should join the company. "Vicky has amazing experience in financial management, Jen," Michael said, his eyes glowing with excitement. "We need someone like her to help us grow." I nodded and swallowed my objections. What Michael didn't know was that I had already secured a series of funding deals through my own connections. Our growth strategy was already well underway. Victoria started as a financial consultant, but her ambitions were clear from day one. She inserted herself into executive meetings, voiced opinions on everything from marketing to product development, and slowly stacked leadership roles with her business school friends. I watched it all quietly from my office, focusing on our technologies and client relationships. To her, I wasn't a founder or an innovator. I was just Michael's quiet sister. The tension between us built steadily until last week's party, the moment everything changed. Victoria had just been appointed CFO, a position she had campaigned for relentlessly. To celebrate, she organized a lavish party at the Four Seasons, inviting Silicon Valley's elite, venture capitalists, tech journalists, influencers, everyone who could boost her rising star. I arrived early in a simple black dress, chosen for understated elegance. Victoria dazzled in a designer gown worth more than some people's salaries. As I approached to congratulate her, she turned to one of her Stanford friends and said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Why is the cleaning maid here? This is an executive party." The room didn't fall silent, Silicon Valley parties never do, but I felt the ripple of awkward glances. Michael stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. His silence cut deeper than her words. Victoria smirked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you're Michael's sister. It's just that you're always hiding in that back office. I hardly ever see you at important company functions." She laughed lightly. "Though I suppose someone has to handle the technical details." I stood there absorbing every condescending word. Years of being underestimated, dismissed, and pushed aside crystallized into one sharp moment. But I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I smiled, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Congratulations on your new position, Victoria. I'm sure tomorrow will be quite interesting." She barely acknowledged me, already turning back to her admirers. Michael caught my eye, but I shook my head and slipped out early. I had work to do. That night, in my home office, I opened my laptop and pulled out documents I'd hoped never to use. The truth was, Victoria had never bothered to study the company's ownership structure. 3 years ago, when we needed capital, Michael sold me 17% of his shares to avoid outside investors. He was so eager to impress Victoria that he signed the papers without reading the fine print. I now own 67% of Chin Global Solutions. I worked through the night, emailing board members, calling our legal counsel, preparing announcements. As the sun rose over Silicon Valley, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. Dad told us to take care of each other. But sometimes, taking care of the company means making hard choices. The next morning, I arrived early to the conference room. At 9 a.m. sharp, Victoria strode in with a triumphant smile, carrying her orientation papers. That smile froze when she saw me seated at the head of the table alongside board members on video calls, legal counsel, and a pale-looking Michael. "Jennifer, what are you doing here?" she demanded. "I have a CFO orientation scheduled." "Actually, Victoria," I said calmly. "We need to discuss some changes in the company's structure." Her composure slipped. "What changes?" I opened my laptop and projected the document onto the main screen. "As of this morning, I am exercising my rights as the majority shareholder of Chin Global Solutions to implement organizational restructuring." "Majority shareholder?" She gave a brittle laugh. "That's ridiculous. Michael and I control 67%. "I own 67%, I interrupted quietly. "Would you like to see the paperwork?" I displayed the ownership breakdown. Her face twisted through disbelief, anger, and fear. "This can't be right," she hissed at Michael. "Tell her this isn't right." Michael looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. "It's true," he said softly. "I sold Jen part of my shares." "I never thought." "Never thought what?" Victoria snapped. "That your little mouse of a sister would actually use her power?" I held up a hand. "This isn't a challenge, Victoria. It's a correction." I turned to the board members. "As you've seen in the documents, there have been concerning decisions in recent months: the hiring of unqualified personnel at inflated salaries, the reallocation of R&D funds to marketing, and the attempted sale of our core ad patents to a competitor." The room was silent. For the first time, all eyes were not on Victoria. They were on me, the quietest person in the room, the one with all the power. Victoria's face went white. "How did you know about the patent sale?" "I built our security systems, Victoria," I finished for her. "Did you really think I wouldn't have protocols in place to monitor attempts to access our intellectual property?" One of the board members cleared their throat. "Miss Chin, Jennifer, we've reviewed the documentation you provided. The board supports your proposed restructuring." I nodded in thanks, then turned back to Victoria. "Your position as CFO is terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." I pressed a button on my phone. 2 security guards entered the room. "You can't do this." Victoria's composure finally shattered. She spun toward my brother. "Michael, are you going to let her destroy everything we've built?" "Everything we've built?" I rose slowly to my feet. "Victoria, while you were planning parties and giving interviews about being a woman in tech, I was the one building this company's future. That security system you tried to sell, I developed it. Those major clients you bragged about at events, I brought them in. The technical details you dismissed so casually, they're worth billions." Victoria turned to Michael, desperate. "Do something." My brother looked between us, and for a brief moment, I saw the boy who used to defend me on the playground. But this wasn't a playground fight, and we weren't children anymore. "I'm sorry, Vicky," Michael said softly. "Jen's right. We lost sight of what this company is really about." As the security guards led Victoria away, her threats echoing down the hall, I felt no satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. It was protection, protecting our father's legacy, our company's future, and even Michael from his own blind spots. The next few weeks were a blur of change. I restructured the executive team, bringing back talented people Victoria had pushed aside. We refocused on technology development, and when we announced new security patents, our stock price soared. Michael and I had long, late-night conversations in the conference room we once shared with Dad. "I forgot who you really are," Michael admitted one evening. "Somewhere along the way, I started seeing you through Victoria's eyes instead of my own." "We both forgot," I replied. "We forgot that family means being honest with each other, even when it's hard." 3 months later, an envelope arrived from Victoria's lawyer, divorce papers for Michael, along with a demand for a hefty settlement. Michael signed them without hesitation. "You know," he said, putting down the pen, "Dad always said you were the smart one." I smiled. Dad said we were both smart in different ways. He was right. We just had to remember how to work together. A year has passed since the night Victoria mocked me as the cleaning maid. Chin Global Solutions has tripled in value. Our security system is becoming the industry standard. Michael and I have found our rhythm again. He handles public relations while I drive innovation. Last week, I delivered the keynote at a major tech conference. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, I thought about all the quiet people, the ones behind the scenes, underestimated, overlooked. Success isn't about being the loudest person in the room, I told them. It's about being the most observant, the most prepared, and sometimes, yes, the quietest. Because true power isn't found in titles or corner offices. It's found in knowing your worth and standing your ground when it matters most. As for Victoria, last I heard, she was working at a small startup, still telling anyone who will listen about how she once served as CFO of Chin Global Solutions. Sometimes I see her quoted in articles about women in tech, and I can't help but smile. She still doesn't understand that leadership isn't about the title you hold, it's about the value you create. I keep my father's picture on my desk. His kind eyes remind me of his last words, "Take care of each other." And in the end, that's exactly what I did. I took care of our company, our legacy, and yes, even my brother. Sometimes, taking care means making hard choices. But as long as you stay true to your principles, you'll never lose your way. The cleaning maid, it turns out, knew exactly what she was doing all along.